Thank you for watching this webinar, everyone. I appreciate very much for providing me with this opportunity. I'm Tsuneo Kato from Doshisha University, located in Kyoto, Japan. Before starting my talk, I would like to express my gratitude to Professor Seiji Yamamoto, the leader of this project funded by our national grant, and Professor Mariko Sugahara for her advice and a discussion about English. I will give my talk titled Learning Second Language Expression with Form-Focused Trialogue-Based CALL System. Contents of my talk. After a short introduction, I will explain the design of our robot-assisted language learning system and an experiment with it. Then in section 3, I will explain a new computer-based dialogue-based CALL system. Then in section 4 and 5, I will present 2 of our recent activities. In this webinar series, 3 times before, Professor Minematsu gave an interesting talk started from input and output for training L2 communication, and then focused on how to detect listening disfluency. Today, I will talk about output practice. Robert De Keyser stated that L2 learners need systematic practice that upgrades their declarative knowledge of syntactic forms to procedural knowledge first, and then to reach automatization. Mario Swain stated that learning takes place when learners encounter a gap in their linguistic knowledge of the second language. By noticing the gap, learners become aware of it and may be able to modify their output so that they learn something new about the language. Our goal is to support such learning of L2 learners. For most L2 learners, oral communication is probably one of the most difficult skills to acquire. One-on-one tutoring by a skilled instructor is said to be the best way. In reality, majority learn in one-to-many classrooms. The learners cannot make enough practice of communication there. A great sense of expectation is given for dialogue-based computer-assisted language learning system, DB-CALL. DB-CALL systems can provide individualized training menu as much as learners want in an environment with less anxiety. DB-CALL systems have various designs depending on learners' age, proficiency levels, social context, and goals of learning. As you may probably know, Bibao published an encompassing review paper on DB-CALL in 2019, and a meta-analysis paper on the effect of type of interaction, modality, constraints, feedback, and so on in 2022. The paper confirmed the effectiveness of form-focused and goal-oriented systems, system-guided interactions, corrective feedback, and gamification. He classified DB-CALL system into 4 classes based on 2 features. One is direction of adaptability, one-way or two-way, and the other is a level of user control, high and low. The form-focused system that I focus today and the system-guided instruction is here. It has one-way adaptability, which means the system does not change its behavior depending on learner's response, and the low level of user control. The goal-oriented system is here. It has two-way adaptability and a high level of user control. Bibau's meta-analysis paper also reported that DB-CALL systems are effective, especially for lower proficiency learners. I list a few typical systems. As a form-focused system, a grid system provides training on Dutch verb second with corrective feedback. Their paper reported that the system was effective for learning in either with or without corrective feedback, but participants who received the feedback evaluate the system more favorably. Various systems have been reported as goal-oriented systems, such as Spell, Amin, Ivel, Halef, etc. As for the system-guided interaction, Juan's Smart U English facilitated authentic contextual EFL speaking and conversation environment on the mobile-assisted language learning application. As for the correct feedback, Shadiev recently published a paper on their speech-enabled correct feedback using Google Speech Recognition and Grammarly, and an experiment on a collaborative learning project. Deepak developed cognitive immersive language learning environment by combining AI with extended reality and realized multi-party, multimodal interaction. They confirmed learners' improvement in vocabulary, comprehension, and conversation skills. Next, I will talk about the situation in Japan. Though our country accepts many tourists and workers from abroad, most Japanese seldom have chances of L2 communication in their local community. Because TV programs are broadcasted in Japanese, they seldom have chances of listening to English speech. To consolidate English education, especially of communication, the Ministry of Education advanced the start of English education from the third grade of elementary schools in 2020. Students take English classes once a week in elementary schools and 3 times a week on average from junior high school to high school. However, since long ago, many students have difficulty in English. When they enter a company and start working in global business, they realize that they do not reach the required level. I'm also one of them. So our laboratory started developing a DB-CALL system for such students. As our target learners were the average students who seldom have opportunities of English communication, we tried to simulate a realistic environment. We created various scenarios on daily topics with natural dialogue flow. Furthermore, we designed a system not to be restricted by poor ASR accuracy. Consequently, we designed a system where 2 now robots exhibit model conversation to a learner and invite the learner to join in. The system expects implicit learning through watching the model conversation between the robots. We named the system joining in type robot-assisted language learning, JIT-RALL for short. This slide shows the basic protocol of the system. There are two robots, R1 and R2. R1 plays a role of a teacher and R2 plays a role of a peer learner. First, R1 asks a question to R2 and R2 answers the question. Next, R1 asks the same or a similar question to the learner. The learner can answer the question in reference to the model answer that R2 made. When the learner responds, "Pardon me," or "Can you repeat it?" R1 repeats the question. However, the system does not change feedback depending on the learner's responses. I will show you a video of an early version.
What time did you get up this morning?
I get up at 7:30.
Okay. And what time did you get up this morning?
I got up at 7 o'clock.
Oh, it is very early. What did you have for breakfast?
I had electricity for breakfast.
I have never had electricity. Is it delicious?
Yes, it is very delicious for me.
I see. And what did you have for breakfast?
I have pan and coffee.
Good.
Next, what should the system focus on? Everything is difficult: vocabulary, pronunciation, grammar, but it is essential to construct a meaningful and grammatically correct sentence promptly. There are many grammatical rules that are difficult for L2 learners. Whatever is good, most of them are basics that every learner knows, but they are difficult to operate. We focus on the inanimate subject construction with a causative or psychological verb. For example, the black suits made him look thin, or the movie frightened me. We chose the inanimate subject construction because this type of expression is popular in European languages, but not popular in East Asian languages. We have explored effective training methods for learning such specific syntactic forms with the JIT-RALL system. The basic learning method is question answering. We investigated which order is more effective to show a model answer before or after the learner's answer. Or is it effective for learners' retention to execute the same scenario twice on the same day? And is it effective to repeat the same question immediately after the learner's first answer? We came across an interesting problem. We basically conducted question answering, but we met some participants who couldn't come up with their own answer. We made them simply repeat the model answers instead. But what is different between question answering and repetition? I show an example. As a QA task, R1 first asks R2 what attracts foreigners to Japanese culture. R2 shows a model answer. Then R1 asks the same question to the learner. The learner thinks his own answer. As a RP task, the question and answer between R1 and R2, and the question to the learner are the same. The difference is the instruction that an experimenter gives before starting the training. The typical learner errors are different. In the QA training, the typical errors are incorrect sentences rephrasing the model answer or single word answer, while in the RP training, learners often responded with only a fragment of the model answer. So the processing in learner's brain is different. We conducted an experiment comparing the QA and the RP training methods. We collected 47 Japanese students from various departments of our university. The schedule is shown here. They take a pre-test on day 1, receive training from day 2 to day 4, and then take a post-test on day 5. They take detention tests on days 15 and 35. At the pre, post, and the retention test, we use the same scenario, but no model answer is provided. Every question is not repeated. Participants are assigned to either group so that the scores at the pre-test are counterbalanced. During the training period, the participants execute 2 daily changing scenarios in the specified manner in about 30 minutes. This table shows criteria for evaluation. We classify learners' answers into 3 levels. Level A is grammatically correct or containing minor errors using the target syntactic form. Level B is answering questions without using the syntactic form. A typical one is a single word answer. Level C is incorrect or no answer. A typical one is I don't know. 2 groups were compared in terms of the mean percentages of level A answers. These graphs show the results. For each group, the bars show the percentages of the 3 levels in the pre, post, and the 2 retention tests. At the pre-test, the percentages of level A answers were almost the same between 2 groups. At the post-test, the percentages increased about 30 points for both groups, and they were not different between the groups. At the retention test, the QA group showed 10% higher percentages of level A answers than those for RP group, which were significantly different. The p-value were below 1% at the retention test on day 15 and 4% on day 35. We are moving on to the next section, from in-person learning with humanoid robots to online learning with computer characters. COVID-19 prevented us from conducting in-person experiments for a couple of years. That pandemic made online learning popular, and the online learning made recruitment of participants easier, which enabled larger scale experiments. So we moved from the in-person JIT-RALL to our new daily call system on a computer. You may be interested in difference in the effects of in-person and online trainings. we had developed a prototype and conducted a small experiment comparing the effects of in-person and online trainings previously. This is our setup. We collected 22 Japanese university students and conducted a 6-day schedule. We evaluate the performance by percentages of level A answers. In addition, we measure the participants' eye gaze on the robots or the characters. This slide shows the results. We had the same 3 classes as those in experiment 1. And the online call group showed a lower ratio of level A answers at the pretest. However, after 4 days practice, the ratio increased up to more than 70%. The online training was not less effective than the in-person training. The eye gaze data also showed no significant difference between the 2 methods. So we moved from the in-person training with JIT-RALL to online training with a new Davy call system. This is a system configuration of the new JIT avatar system. We implemented the performance of 2 characters on the Unity game engine on a server. A learner connects the server with a remote desktop function. We created human-like characters, but they are a little eerie, so we chose the pink cat and the brown rabbit. Okay, I'll show you its video.
Hi.
Today, we are driving to a beach. Hey, it is really beautiful weather today.
Yeah, a nice day. I am so excited.
What makes you feel that way?
This wonderful weather makes me excited.
Right. What makes you feel that way?
This wonderful weather makes me excited.
What makes you feel that way?
This wonderful weather makes me excited.
The system repeats the same question to the learner
Definitely.
in the training period.
Please drive carefully.
All right.
We conducted an experiment to investigate dependency on learners' proficiency levels. In experiment 1, the QA group showed longer retention than the RP group, but showed no improvement at the post-test. Why is it? We wondered if the effect of training methods are different depending on learners' proficiency levels. Considering the background of introducing the RP training into the system, we hypothesized that the QA training is more effective for learners with higher proficiency, while the RP training is more effective for learners with lower proficiency. We conducted an experiment to verify the dependency on learners' proficiency levels. We collected 66 Japanese university students. 33 were from science and engineering, 14 were from the Department of English, and 9 were from liberal arts. We modified the schedule as shown in the table. On day 0, we have participants take an English proficiency test, and on day 105, they take the third retention test. The proficiency test was self and simplified proficiency test that measures learners' general proficiency of English in CEFR J gauge. It was developed by University of Grenoble-Alpes. The CEFR J is a finely segmented CEFR gauge as shown here. It is proposed in Japan because 80% of Japanese learners are categorized in class A1 and A2, and a finer gauge is needed. The distribution of the participants' proficiency levels are indicated here. 30% were in A.3, A2.1, and A2.2 levels. 70% were in B1 and B2 levels. There was no level C participants. We assigned the participants to either QA or RP group evenly in the beginner and the intermediate levels, respectively. I show you the results of the beginner level participants first. We had 9 for the QA group and 11 for the RP group. The initial ratio of level A answers were as low as 20% for both groups. At the post-test, they increased up to 60% for the QA group, while to 44% for the RP group. They remained more than 15% in differences at the retention tests. These box charts show distributions of the participants' increased numbers of level A answers from these of the pretests. For example, the farthest left 2 charts indicate that the mean increases of level A answers at the post-test were around 5 for the QA group, while around 3 for the RP group. The increases of the QA group were significantly higher than those of the RP group from the post-test to retention test on day 35. These bar graphs are the results of intermediate level participants. We had 25 for QA group and 21 for the RP group. The initial ratio of level A answers were 44% for the QA group and 36% for the RP group. At the post-test, they increased up to 70% for the QA group, while to 72% for the RP group. At the retention test, they finally reached in the same level around 67%. These box charts are distributions of the participants' increased numbers of level A answers for the intermediate level learners. The increase of the RP group was significantly higher than the QA group at the post-test, but not at retention tests. Discussions. For the beginner level participants, the QA training was more effective than the RP training. This indicates that even for beginner learners, the QA training induces deeper processing, resulting in longer retention than the RP training. For the intermediate level participants, the RP training was more effective than the QA training at the post-tests. It seems that the RP training efficiently reminded the participants of the learned form, which might cause the RP training groups higher ratio than the QA group at the post-test, but retention effects seems on a par. Some participants in the QA groups appropriately answered questions without using the expected form. The QA training has a weaker effect of regulating learners' answer. Okay, let's move on to the final section. Recent advancements in ASR and NLP technologies make it possible to give feedback to learners' answers. So we implemented our simple feedback function using Whisper ASR and GPT-4o. This is a system configuration. We add an interface for GPT-4o. The process is as follows. Audio speech is transcribed by faster Whisper ASR. GPT-4o classifies the transcribed text into 4 levels, and the computer characters behave differently based on the levels. This table shows levels and feedback. We classify them into 4 levels. Level 4 is meaningful and grammatically correct sentences using an inanimate subject construction. Its feedback is applause and moving on to the next step. Level 3 is meaningful sentences using an inanimate subject construction but containing a few local errors. Its feedback is showing try again balloon and repeating the question. Level 2 is meaningful sentences without using an inanimate subject construction. Level 1 is meaningless sentences. In these cases, the feedback is showing a listen carefully balloon, repeating the model conversation and asking the question again. I will show you a video.
Hi.
Hi. Did you watch the esport game last night?
Yes, I did. It was a fantastic game.
Yes, but I was focused on the chairs that the players sat on.
What kind of chair would make them comfortable?
An armchair would make them comfortable.
What kind of chair would make them comfortable?
Reclining chairs makes them comfortable.
What kind of chair would make them comfortable?
Reclining chair would make them comfortable.
All right. What kind of chair would make them comfortable?
Sorry, I don't understand. Please tell me more.
And the cat and rabbit repeat the model conversation. We conducted an experiment verifying the effect of the feedback. We collected 16 Japanese university students. The proficiency level distribution is shown here. 45% were in A1 and A2 levels. 55% were in B1 and B2 levels. The schedule is the same as experiment 2. Evaluation is based on the ratio and the increase of level A answers, while where levels 4 and 3 are regarded as level A and levels 2 and 1 are regarded as non-A. Before showing the participants' performance, I explained the performance of Whisper ASR and the classification of learners' answers using GPT-4o. The word error rate was 8.1%, which was quite good for L2 learners this fluent speech. We tuned the prompt for classification as we tuned the prompt for classification as it is important to suppress false rejection. We prepared 177 model answers and tuned the prompt not to reject the model answers. The final prompt consists of definitions of the inanimate subject, construction, and the 4 classes with multi-step procedures for the classification. We evaluate its performance with total 281 utterances of the participants at the pre and post tests. The accuracy was 96%. It is good. As you can see from the confusion matrix, there are 11 utterances confused between level 2 and level 1. They are all responses such as, I don't know. These graphs show the participants' performance. The upper 2 bars in the left show percentages of level A answers at the pre and post test of all participants in experiment 2. The lower 2 bars show those of the newly collected feedback condition. The feedback condition shows significantly higher, significantly more increase of level A answers than the non-feedback condition. We are collecting more data now, and we report hopefully in the next SLaTE conference. Discussions. Some participants who showed great increases of level A answers in the feedback group commented that the feedback of approach and try again convinced them what is expected in the training. The feedback seems to have an effect of regulating learners to construct a sentence with a specified syntactic form. Summary. This is a summary. We evaluate effects of implicit learning and feedback in learning specific forms of English with the trialogue-based core systems. The QA training has higher retention effects than the RP training. For beginner level learners, the QA training was more effective than the RP training. For intermediate level learners, the RP training was more effective than the QA training at post-test, but equally effective at retention tests. Feedback convinced learners what answers was expected in the training. The QA training without feedback seems weak in regulating learner answers. That's all from me. Thank you very much, and I will take questions.